very first inaugural Grit+Grace with Cheryle.
Woohoo!
I'm excited. I'm particularly excited to have Shelly as our first guest. I just didn't want to wait until one annual conference to bring amazing women leaders and speakers to connect with you all and share their knowledge and their experiences and talk. In particular, Shelly was a speaker at Grit+Grace conference earlier this year, and her talk was such a hit. And I could see women were standing up, raising their hands. They wanted to ask questions of Shelly. She just, in a room of 500, it's a different conversation when it's 500 people versus, the 20 or so that are in the room today and on Facebook. So that's what this is about, is to keep the conversation going, to bring it smaller so we can really get in there and with the details. So you all are here, but we also are streaming live Facebook. So hi, Facebook.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, we're glad to have you too. So I'm excited to have Shelly here. Let me introduce Shelly and she'll get us started. Shelly is a rock star. Let me just start there.
The pants?
Yeah, see,
Let's
we're
just start
twinning.
there.
We're twinning and winning with that leather. We got the memo on the leather pants.
I got my leather, we got my wine.
Yeah, you got the
Officially
leather.
a rock star now.
But Shelly has had a trailblazing career as a senior executive, marketing executive, and some of the biggest brands, the biggest companies in the country, if not the world, from chief marketing officer at Harley-Davidson, marketing executive at Visa, McDonald's, the list AOL, the list goes on, and has been at the top of the echelon in advertising, global advertising agencies around the world. And we met last year, about this time, I think, of the year. It was cold, I remember.
Yeah, probably.
In that coffee shop.
Yeah.
Spoken Bird. Shout out
That's
to Spoken
right.
Bird,
Yes.
Spoken Bird
Yes.
Coffee shop. We met and our souls connected. Our stories, our souls, our energy connected. And she told me the journey that she's on now, and I won't spoil it for her, she'll talk a little bit about that. But she's a warrior, a road warrior. She's been through a lot, and she's got a lot to say and to share her experience as a way to help other people. Particularly, I think you've been working with leaders and corporations on how to understand what the essence of their own souls and how to align everything around that. So when she was sharing that with me, I was just jaw dropped. I was like, gosh, I want to be in your session, so I need this, okay?
So I made it to the main stage.
Yeah, she made the main stage because I wanted to hear that. So we're here, but I want more and more people to hear Shelly and her insight and her approach to life and how it can help us in our approach to life. So I'm excited to have Shelly. And for those who are watching on Facebook Live, this is such a message, a powerful discussion message that we're going to have today that I want as many people as possible to hear it. So if you could share this with your friends and create watch parties with your own glass of whatever, share this with your friends, be a watch party, and just get the word out. I really appreciate this is your chance to be a good Samaritan and help someone else help themselves. So with that, I'd like to introduce Shelly Paxton.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. It always warms my heart to hear you talk about that. Thank you. You're such a soul sister.
Yeah.
And I love this. And I love being your inaugural
Yes.
guest.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you all for coming today. It's amazing. And thank you for anybody who hung in with us for being a little bit late, but fashionably late. I mean, come on.
Right.
So, yeah, there are a couple things I'd love to do. I don't want to go super deep into my background. I think Cheryle did an amazing job of giving an overview of who I am. The only things that I'll say on top of that are 3 years ago, the piece that Cheryle alluded to, 3 years ago, I left my corporate career, and I didn't know if I was leaving for good or if I was simply taking a break. But what I really knew is that I had lost myself in service of my career. And it was a really difficult kind of crossroads for me to come to in my life, because I was good at what I did. I was kind of in my zone of excellence. If you're familiar with Gay Hendricks, who's written The Big Leap, and if you don't know that book, please read it. It's amazing. I have actually some visuals that I'll hand out later after for those of you in the room, but is the zone of excellence is like you're really, really good at it, and people want you to stay in this bucket, but your zone of genius is what we're always striving to get to in our lives, right? And so I didn't know what that was, and I said, I need to take time out. I'd been having a nightmare that kind of shook me awake. And made me realize that I was really out of touch with my soul, and I was very out of relationship with myself, and it was painful. It felt devastating, and so I decided to take a risk and invest in myself for a year and say, I'm going to take some time out, and I don't know where this is going to lead me. I don't know if it's going to lead me full circle back to corporate America to be a chief marketing officer somewhere else, or if it's going to lead me on the journey of a lifetime, which it did. And not to sell you on this, but it also led me to a journey that became a business and a book. So my first book is being published in January. It's called Soulbbatical. Thank you. Writing a book is really freaking hard work, just in case you needed another person. I don't know if anybody in here online has written a book, but I learned a lot of lessons writing this. This is the advanced reader copy. It comes out in hardback on January 14th.
And can I just say,
yeah.
I read it, I went and I picked it up, and I do what I normally do. I skip to the middle of the book. That's where I start, okay? And 12 pages later, I was like, stop. You can't just read this book from the middle, so I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to put it down. But before I did, I took a peek at the end. This book is not just good, it's really good. Really good.
Thank you.
And you put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's very raw.
And it just sucks you in, and you see yourself in that, in your story. So thank you for that. But it's excellent.
One other thing I will say, because I've threaded it through this conversation today, is I am a Brené Brown devotee. Oh yes, we've got a lot of them in the room. Oh my God. I hope we have others online too. And by the way, for those of you watching this online, please participate, give us some comments. Cheryle and I are following them, so we want to pull you into this conversation as well. So on the subject of, I call her Sister Brené. I love her. On the subject of Sister Brené, I had the absolute honor of going down to Texas and training with her in September, which I almost said last month, but oh my God, we're in November. So I was part of her a training program to become certified to teach her Dare to Lead. So I don't know if anybody's read her most recent book. Her most recent book is called Dare to Lead. It's like the culmination of all of her work, and it teaches everybody in life and leadership the 4 courage-building skill sets, and it's brilliant, and I'm now certified to teach this work. So I've threaded a little tiny bit of this. We don't have the option in this room in the time that we have to go really deep, but just know that's work that I do. And honestly, like probably more than anything, I just call myself a rebel soul. Like I'm just a rebel soul who connects with other rebel souls who want to go out there and have an impact in the world and do it in our way and do it super authentic to who we are and what we want. And not let anything stand in our way. And for a long, long time, I was in corporate America for 26 years. So for me, my big message in the world, and this is something I'll say right now, I just feel like it's never too late. And we say it all the time. It's like I remember being in my 20s. I was 26 years old asking the same questions that I was asking at 46. And I look back, and as I was writing the book, I was like, oh my God, that thing I did when I was 26, that was like my first Soulbbatical. I didn't even know it. I was asking those questions, and I was 46 when I left Harley. I was 48 when I opened my own business, and I will be 50 or 1 week from 50 when this sucker gets published in January. So it's never, ever too late. And that is a word, that is a message that not only we can embrace, but like, let's spread the word and let's prove people wrong and let's show everybody what's possible, right? And it's even more possible when you're true to yourself because it becomes easier. It's not easy, It's definitely not easy, but it certainly becomes easier. So the first thing, so how I've structured this is it's absolutely a conversation. I will lead the conversation. I've got 10 things written down, which I've kind of called the code of a chief soul officer. So when I left Harley, I called myself, I said, I'm going on a Soulbbatical. I made up this crazy word with 2 B's, and people were like, what is a Soulbbatical? I've heard of sabbatical. And I'm like, going to nurture my soul. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And now I've realized that Soulbbatical is a way of being. Soulbbatical is about being more authentic, more courageous, and more on purpose, and having the impact you want to have in the world. And it doesn't just mean it doesn't mean at all leaving your job. That was my path, but your path could be very, very different. And I christened myself in the process Chief Soul Officer because at the time I was having a massive identity crisis, and you'll read about it if you read the book. I had never been anything other than working for these big brands that Cheryle mentioned with these big titles. And I didn't realize, I thought, oh, that stuff doesn't mean anything to me. Well, you know what? It meant a lot to me. And it was really, really difficult to start to separate, who the hell is Shelly Paxton? Who am I without these things? I know I'm someone, I know I'm valuable, I know I'm worthy, but I don't know where that is or what that means or even how to get there. And so that's what this book has become, and my journey has become a bit of a roadmap to say, what does that look like? And what are some of the, it's a bit of a roller coaster. What are some of the hills that you're gonna go up and down? And so I've kind of tried to codify this. I guess you could call them the 10 commandments of a chief soul officer if I'm sort of starting my own spiritual religion kind of thing. So let's start with number 1. So the first one is, as a chief soul officer, we don't ask for permission. We give ourselves permission. And so these orange Post-it notes, what I would love everybody to do, and we'll spend a few minutes on this and give you some quiet time, grant yourself permission to release anything you need to release to be present in this hour, in this evening. Here's another way to frame the question. What do I need to give myself permission to do, to feel, or not to do in order to show up for this learning experience? Anything. So I have written things in the past like, I need to slow down because I'm so frenetic during the day and this is a place to slow down. I need to forget about what's going on at home. I need to, what are other things? Oh, this is a big one for me. I need to allow myself to be uncool and get curious because my rebel is like a cool facade always. It's like, I don't do that work. What? Write those Post-it notes? Too cool. I'll sit here and sip my wine. But I'm really digging beyond that. So think about what it is for you and give yourself permission. And as we do, and please, everybody at home or wherever you are, do the same. Take a few minutes, think about what you need. And then I'm gonna ask if in the comments online, and then maybe few people in the room would wanna share an example of what they've written out, because I'll tell you more often than not, these are common bonds amongst all of us and we can recognize all of them. Yeah, let's get some sharing going. I love it. So if anybody online didn't hear that, you're Melanie. Melanie? Yes. Yes, right. Melanie said releasing the need to have it all perfect, to have it all right. And then what did you say? Learning along the way?
And not having to have all the answers.
Not having to have all the answers. Yes. Yes. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else in the room want to share? Yep. Michelle?
Permission to be open and vulnerable and open to change.
Love it. Permission to be open, vulnerable, and open to change. Yes. Oh wait, we'll do you next. Go ahead. No, Susan, go ahead, and we'll.
I was really about continuing to have faith and trust in God.
Oh.
As a director, being able to get through every storm season or whatever it is that comes up.
Beautiful. Continuing to have faith and trust in God. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, and then Callie? Can you speak up just a little bit?
I am giving myself permission to be
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
You hit
I
on
like
one
that.
of the commandments, sister. I can't wait to get there. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
So to
Yeah.
share with the the online, the question,
Yes.
you can repeat the question. She's giving herself permission to need, to be, it's okay to need, and to need what you need and be needy.
The second commandment is that we believe that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. And this took me a very long time to learn. I was rebelling against everything for the majority of my life. I was that rebel who was like, rebelling against my parents' authority and what school wanted, like basically anything to do with authority, anything to do with tradition. I was like, oh, hell no. Like, I want nothing to do with that. And what I've realized as I have matured, as I've gone deeper inside, and as I've been on this Soulbbatical journey, is that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. And now I've completely flipped the script to be rebelling for who I am and what I want. And that idea of coming from a place of rebelling for versus rebelling against is very powerful. Very powerful. So I love that idea, and I wanted to share that. Brene has an absolutely funny way of saying this. She says, "Don't be a cover band," which I think is so awesome. That's her. So mine is the rebel speak. Hers is, don't be a cover band. Be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. As a leader, as a human in the world, be your own authentic flavor and brand of who you are. And what impact you want to have in the world. And so, it's fascinating as I look back on my career, like I was trying to have this very traditional career because what I realized much later on is that I was following my dad's footsteps. I was totally and completely living someone else's dream my entire life. And that was a massive wake-up call and a big part of what I write about and what I kind of had the aha I had in my journey. And now that I understand so much more who I am, I realize, wow, this whole journey starts with really a lot of self-awareness. So much of the work that I do and a lot of the things that I'm pointing out here are about knowing yourself, right? Knowing what you need and asking for permission, knowing what boundaries you want to create, and we'll get there, right? And teaching people how to treat you and modeling that in the world. So much of that comes from this very authentic place. So
We
oh,
have
yeah.
we actually have comments. I couldn't read them on the iPad.
Oh, good. Go for it.
But permission to show up in spite of my vulnerability.
Ooh.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. That was someone listed that. Bianca said permission to take a chance. Permission to take a chance.
I love that.
Permission to let go from Kathleen Rogers. So they're coming in, and
Great. Thank
just
you all
wanted
for
to-
sharing. Yes.
Thank
yes.
you for sharing that.
And please keep interrupting so that we can bring more of that
Right.
into the session. So what I wanted to do, so I actually, this isn't the exercise, but I'll plant the seed with all of you because it's maybe fun to play with outside of this room. I realized as I was sort of exploring this whole thing and I was on my own journey that I had almost this alter ego, and I now call it my why-identity instead of my identity, because it was always asking, well, why are you doing that? Why wouldn't you just want to do the thing that, gets you into a good college? Why wouldn't you just want to make your parents happy? Why wouldn't you? And it was trying to constantly wrestle with and pin my rebel to the mat. Right? And so I explored this whole idea of my identity, but it was kind of fun to almost realize that I had these competing forces inside of me, and now I understand them. And at the time, for much of my life and decades, I didn't. So that's a fun thing to explore as you're kind of digging, what do I stand for? And what are some of those competing forces? Because we all have them in our minds, right? They're gremlins, they're our ego, they're sort of our alter egos, all of that. So a fun thing to play around with. And I'll give you 2 questions that I write about in the book that I think are really powerful around the topic of authenticity. And so just so you guys know, one of the things that I've done in the book is that there are 4 sections in the book around authenticity, courage, fulfillment and purpose, which are self-compassion is kind of baked into purpose, and we'll talk a little bit about it today. At the end of each one of those, I do a bit of a soul search. So I ask the reader, like, now you've just seen my journey, and you've been on the wild roller coaster, as Cheryle has, right, as you were reading the book. You've been on this journey. Now I'd like you to sit back and do a little self-reflection. What does this mean for you? So at the end of each section, there are these soul search questions. And so I've peppered a few of those throughout this conversation tonight to give you a flavor for what they are. Okay, so 2 questions. These are biggies. The first one is, what would you change in your life right now if you were being 100% true to yourself? What would you change in your life right now if you were being 100% true to yourself?
So you want people online to answer this question?
I would love people online and in the room to answer this question. This is also another one, like, we're just scratching the surface. We could spend an entire day together and go through all of this. So these are things that you can take home with you. But even if you wrote down your first answer, and don't overthink it, whatever just intuitively came to you, land on that. And I would love to share, for those of us brave and courageous, right? That's who we are as Chief Soul Officers. I'd love to share in the room and get some shares online as well.
Give some examples.
Maybe I should. Man. Do you have one?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. What would change in your life right now if you were being 100% true to yourself?
My life has changed because I dared to be 100% true to myself. For me, that meant stepping out of corporate America after 10 years. And to focus on this. But I've had a lot of these kinds of moments when sometimes life will force you to be true to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the first time I've elected to be true to myself without life shoving me off the cliff to be true.
Awesome.
So for me, that was, but I feel like I'm in a place where to be true to myself is, how do I imagine my next life, reimagine it, and instead of just slotting myself into what I've always done, how can I be really true to myself and open up the possibilities of what's possible? So
I love it.
So my life is different because I don't have a paycheck coming in. So.
Amen, sister. All right. Anybody
I hope
want
that
to share?
helped someone out there around the table.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, and I'll give mine too. Like I believe in this. So I've obviously changed my life a lot in the past 3 years. And if I were being 100% true to myself, I'd write the book that I just wrote. I will write book number 2 that will be even edgier. And I will be seen more, because what I realized is, up until, I would say even now, I have still managed my image online and out in the world, and I want to be seen as the vulnerable, messy, flawed human that I am, who's just muddling my way through this, but making really courageous decisions along the way. And I want people to see what that looks like. And so I really, really am pushing myself to be out there more, to be doing more videos, to be doing more speaking engagements, and telling my story in sort of all of its guts and glory. So I will continue to do more of that. Yeah. Anybody else want to share in the room?
I came back, I feel like I give so much to people in my life, and they all appreciate it. There's some who need more. I feel like if I were to change anything, I would make the time what I'm stressing about doing to do something for other people, because I feel like there's so much that I care about. So for me, that's what I would take on. I can do it. Just volunteer, get out, kids. I'm more than just talking to them, and I feel like everyone can use.
Yeah. More service, more impact. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think I didn't write it in that language, but I really feel like that's part of what it means to be a chief soul officer, right? There's a beautiful phrase that I use somewhere in here, impact over ego. And I think you kind of just nailed it. I think it's so beautiful, this idea of what impact do we want to have in the world, and like, let's just get over ourselves, right? And it's hard to do at times because our ego's job is to protect us and keep us safe and keep us in that sandbox. But exactly like you said, there's so much more that we can do. Here's another question. And we might not have time to dive into this because I want to get through as many of these as possible, but I want to leave you with this one. And I want to leave everybody at home with this one. If you're living, so this is a question. This is a big one that like, it's like, 2x4 to like my head or maybe even my solar plexus. If you're living the way you are now, in 3, 5, or 10 years, are you moving closer to who you want to become or further away?
I think that needs repeating. So if I think about where I am now,
Yep.
if I take where I am now
And the direction that you're headed right now, like the
I'm
trajectory that you're on right now.
okay,
Yep.
and if I think about the path I'm on now,
Yep.
and where that path leads me,
Mhm.
and
3,
to
5,
5
or 10 years later.
is that really where I want to be?
Yeah. Is that getting me to where I want to be and who I want to be? Is it getting me closer to that or further away from that? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. Is that question 2?
That was question 2. Yeah.
Wow.
That one gets me every time because I still am asking myself. I mean, this is one, I think I posted this on social media today. This is one that I use as a reflection question on a regular basis. So I think it's great for us to ask ourselves this now, but I'll pull it out like 3 or 4 times a year and do reflections and reviews with myself to say, do I feel like I'm heading in that direction where I'm really playing big? Like, am I being seen in the arena doing the things I want to do to have the impact I want to have? Or am I still kind of sitting back playing a little bit small? And try to be honest with myself. So this is one I pull out frequently. So I wanted to bring it up in this room to say, I think there's opportunity for you to, one, start to think about it now. We won't go deeper into it, but take that home with you and spend some time with it. Because I've found it to be one of those things where a lot of stuff comes up around it. It's a good planning question. I don't know if anything coming up online, or are we, people?
One comment that kind of goes along with, are you being closer to who you want to be? One thing that someone would change to be more authentic is to take charge of their life and go for what's actually meant for them, and that is from Miss Michelle McClendon.
Awesome.
That's
I support that. Sounds like a chief soul officer in the making.
Yeah,
that
that's
makes me
right.
happy.
Is that Michelle McClendon? Is that her name? Oh, go Michelle.
Go
Keep
Michelle,
giving us
that's
these
right.
comments.
That's right. Michelle's setting the tone. Everybody keep coming with us. Okay, so we're gonna move on. I know I'm blowing through these quickly. I want to give you some material to kind of take with you and think about, and just knowing that we have precious time together. If there's anything you want to pause or go deeper on, please stop me. But for now, we're going to move on to commandment number 3. I keep thinking of I have like Monty Python and the Holy Grail in my mind every time I say that. My mind keeps going there. So number 3 is, as chief soul officers, we choose courage over comfort. This is a big one that Brene also talks about, and this has been huge for me in my journey. And it is never the easy thing, but it's almost always the right thing, right? And it's, so many people say this now, but we do hard things, right? And we have that strength, and we can model that vulnerability, and we can sit in the discomfort and learn from it. And the only way to get through pain is through it, right? And right now we are a society that is obsessed with trying to escape it. Absolutely, it's a pandemic, just everything in terms of stress, in terms of how we numb out to so many things, in terms of suicide rates going up, in terms of, drug epidemics. Like, there's so much that's happening in our world today, and so much of it has to do with not wanting to sit in this pain and learn from it. And the only way we can is to go through it and be with it. And that is not easy by any stretch. And from the nods in the room, I can tell we all know that. We've been there. We've sat in it, and it's tough. And that's where those are like the master classes in life, I like to call them, right? Like, this is really when we get taught. One of the things I talk about in the book, where my life and my path forward became incredibly clear to me, was when my dad had 2 strokes. And it happened while I was on Soulbbatical. And there are many gifts in that, because I learned from what he went through, almost losing him, and his recovery 2.5 years later to this day. He is still working hard to recover. And it became so clear to me that life was too short and it was too precious. And like, why would I waste any of my time on something that wasn't coming from my heart and soul? And so sitting in that discomfort and learning from it, and actually having conversations with my dad, realizing one of my big epiphanies was, we had been living, I followed in my dad's footsteps, and it took me decades to realize that, right? Like, oh shit, I'm living his dream, right? And it was a bit of a painful awakening for me. And I said to my dad as he was recovering, and he made the decision to live after the second stroke, which was very painful, I said, oh my God, like, I learned from him that we had been living business our whole lives. And we were now switching to the business of living. And it was like, whew, like, I still get goosebumps when I say that. And so I offer that up as, whenever you need some perspective in your life, thinking about that, because I know our work is important to us, our jobs are important to us. At the same time, think about, have you gone too far in living business versus the business of living, and bringing yourself back to understanding what that means. And I think a lot of these commandments kind of get at that notion of the business of living, but I wanted to share that story because it was so powerful in my life.
I wanted to
I feel like
dig
you're
a
doing
little,
that now.
I am, yes, the business of living.
Yes.
It's the business of living. I wanted to dig a little deeper on this courage over comfort.
Oh, yes.
Because I think that we, particularly women, have a tremendous amount of courage, and we're willing to take on discomfort for other people and other causes. So it's not that we aren't, afraid to be uncomfortable, because we will gladly jump in with both feet to be uncomfortable in service of someone else.
Yeah. Versus ourselves.
Yes. Like, and I know this because I talk to a lot of women, but I'm sure this is also true for men as well. But it's particularly true for women, mothers, and women who are caregivers. Like, what's that about? We have a ton of courage. We're okay. We will run into a burning building for somebody else.
Yeah, I think this gets at, a number of things, right? It certainly gets at the first thing of giving ourselves permission, right? It gets at the first commandment, and then there's one that comes later, and somebody in here highlighted this earlier, but we don't ask for help. We don't ask for help. And I think that's part of it as well, right?
Right.
Because sometimes the courage part is asking for help.
Right.
Right? And it's hard to model. But
there are a lot of nods around the table for that, but can I get some nods online for that?
Yeah, and Callie had a comment as well. Oh, yeah.
Yes, you can.
Oh, good, because I've already said lots of swear words. I said I've already said lots of swear words.
I want to understand your perspective on helping us understand why we need to feel the feelings. from my point of view in the work that I do, I believe that you've got to feel the feelings in order to get emotional resiliency, in order to know that you can do it, in order to feel productive about yourself, in order to feel good that you can handle it.
Yes.
What's your perspective on going through the muck in order to get to vulnerability? What's your perspective?
Right. You have to. So the short version is, I agree with you, and I probably speak the language of Brene now, but you have to feel the feelings, because vulnerability, like, even though it's like the ooey gooey center of all of the stuff that's really hard to deal with, but it's what gets us to love and to joy and to connection and to all of the beautiful things that we want to feel and experience as humans. That's the power of vulnerability. And what's difficult about it is it's like, well, I see you and I think vulnerability in you is beautiful, and I think vulnerability in me is weakness, right? We see it in others, and we have to recognize that we need to see that same thing in ourselves. And it's really important for us to feel, because that's the birthplace of all the stuff ultimately we're trying to get to as humans. Does that help? Yeah. And I could do an entire workshop on that because I'm so passionate about it.
What I'm hearing you say is that unless you feel the feeling of the connection of the muck, even, you can't feel the connection of joy.
Totally.
And if you could repeat the question and comment for our online community so they can hear.
So it's really understanding, like, what is the value of vulnerability? Like, my perspective on getting vulnerable, where does it get you? What does it ultimately get you, right? Like, where does feeling the feelings get? So that's what I just shared, and it's the birthplace of joy and connection and creativity and love and all of the beautiful things that we as humans in the world want to experience. So Brene says, I love this line, she always says, we have to embrace the suck. And I think it came from somebody in the military who had asked her to go do this run. And she was just like, I don't do those, like 10Ks or whatever it was. And he was just like, but this is for charity. This is what we do. It's really important that you be on this. And she was just like, I don't like that kind of stuff. And he said, you know what? We just have to embrace the suck. And so I think that's such a great way of, like, summarizing what it feels like to be vulnerable at times. Like, it does suck at times, but embracing the suck also is what helps you get to that breakthrough. And I think so many people spend time, and I've been one of these people, numbing and just trying to not be in the suck. And by not being in the suck, you're also not going to be on the other side of it, because, as Brene says, you can't selectively numb. When you numb the sucky part, you numb the joy, and you numb the connection, and you numb the love, and you numb all the good stuff that we want and we crave as humans. So there's only one way, and that's embracing the suck.
And that requires courage.
Yeah, and that requires courage.
It's like going through the storm. I like to equate it to, when you go through the storm, guess what happens after the storm? A rainbow.
Yeah.
The sun and a rainbow.
Yeah.
So when we give ourselves permission to be in that crap, whatever you want to call it, it takes time. And that can be a year, 6 months, 3 years, whatever that is.
Yeah.
You blossom and you grow.
Yes. I love that, going through the storm. So there's so many different kinds of storms. Like, Brene will call it a shit storm. Like, there's the rainstorm with the beautiful rainbow at the end of it. It's exactly it, but we've got to go through it, right? And we have to hunker down in some way and experience it. And I think that's the most important piece, is that we are there feeling it, and we're experiencing it, and we're connected with the emotions of it, however painful they may be, and we're not armoring up and numbing out to get away from it, because then we're not experiencing, we're not learning, and we're not bridging over to all those positive emotions.
One thing I want to add, when we are in the storm, a lot of times people will ask you, how are you doing? Whether you're going through divorce, you've had job loss, whatever it is in your life, and they say, well, how are you doing? And one of the best responses is to say, thank you for asking. I'm in a tender season right now.
Oh, I love that. I'm in a tender season right now.
So the question, the
that's
comment
beautiful.
that Susan here had was that when you're in the midst of a storm, a crisis, life crisis, soul crisis, whatever the crisis and storm is, that when people ask you, how are you, because you get a lot of that when people know you're going through some stuff, how you doing, and you get tired of trying to explain yourself, well, I'm okay. Do I lie and say I'm fine, I'm okay, or do I go into this long explanation? Her comment was, you're in a tender season. Thanks for asking. I'm in a tender season.
Love that.
I really like that.
I
like
love
that.
that. What do you believe is your personal call to courage? And then where in your life do you want to be braver?
Wow.
And I think those are powerful questions to sit with.
I
And
love
probably
that one.
in the interest of time,
Where do you want to be braver?
And this is where, I mean, honestly, so all of these questions that I'm giving you all tonight, like, these are all you speaking with and getting into relationship with your soul. Like, these are soul questions. This is the soul search. So I just picked a select few, but really, if you sit down, ask yourself these questions, listen deeply, give yourself some quiet and some stillness, see what comes up. They're really powerful. So the fourth commandment is, we know as chief soul officers that self first is not selfish. And I think that's a really important one. And there's a second piece to that, which is that self-worth trumps net worth. And it took me a long time to figure this out. And so really thinking through those, Oprah has an awesome quote around this, because somebody said to her, if somebody says, I'm full of myself, I actually view that as an incredible compliment, because it means I'm so full that I have a lot to give. And that's my whole purpose in life. I want to give. So I think sometimes we're afraid to put ourselves first and make that time, the old oxygen mask, metaphor, right? At the same time, how else do we have the energy to give to people that we love and to have the impact in the world that we want to have if we're not taking care of ourselves first?
That's right.
Right? And so that's a huge, so we're modeling, we slow down, we model self-care and compassion, we actively choose to feed our mind, body, and soul. These are all really important things for us to remember, and we create, communicate, and uphold our boundaries. That's a really critical piece of all of this. Boundaries are what is okay and what is not okay. And the only way to help people understand boundaries is to teach people how to treat us and to say, what does that look like? Here's an exercise that I would love for you guys to spend some time doing. So I call it the soul fuel versus soul sucks exercise of your life. So if you literally take just a blank piece of paper like this, so everybody online can see this, on the left, write my life at the top of it. On the left-hand side, write soul sucks. And on the right-hand side, write soul fuels. Soul sucks are the things that just suck your energy, that you don't want to be doing. And maybe some of them you can't get out of them, but I guess, and I would argue that a lot of them you can get out of, and you just don't want to say no. And then on the right-hand side for the soul fuels, that's like what makes you feel alive, what gives your energy, what re-energizes you. And take a look at those lists. I would recommend spending 15 minutes stream of consciousness, creating those lists, and then step back from the list and then look at it and say, like, what are my observations? What surprises me? What scares me? What insights do I have from that list? And what do I want to do about it? So number 5 is we create our lives, we don't live at the effect of them. We create our lives, we don't live at the effect of them. And I think that's really important. Living at the effect of your life is being in victim mode all of the time. It's being in like the woe is me, life is happening to me, not for me. And I think it's really important for us to say, no, you know what? This is choice. I can create what I want. I first have to get really clear on what I want. And that's always the first stepping point of all of this. And I call it also releasing the shackles of should. So we all have, and I found, like, as I was kind of doing this audit on my life, I realized, like, shoulding all over ourselves is a really big deal, right? It's a really big deal. And I was doing a lot of it. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to it in the book, where I was just like, I realized like, well, I should do that because that makes so-and-so happy, or I should do that because that's what I'm expected to do, or I should do that. Like, look in your language for where you're using should. And then ask yourself, is that something I really want to do? Is that something that, if I want to do it, great, I want to do it. Not I should do it, I want to do it. I get to do it. I'm so honored to be able to do it. But think about your language when you catch with the shoulds. It's really important to say, like, what's going on there? Like, investigate and get curious, right? Number 6 is we look inward, not outward, for guidance and answers. And I think this is such an important one, and this ties to our self-worth as well, right? We are absolutely, like, this goes back to also practicing stillness. So this is asking those deep, deep questions and getting clear on our own sort of internal compass and our own sort of soul navigation and what it's telling us, because often it's screaming at us and we're ignoring it. So it's showing up in different ways. Like, I was getting sick constantly throughout my journey, and I'm like, oh, well, that was my body telling me I was completely out of alignment with my soul. And I finally picked up on that later, right? So really spending that time asking the deep questions and taking responsibility for our own choices. What choices are we actively making, and what's the impact for making those choices? The number 7 is we celebrate values over validation. And values is such an important one. Brene talks a ton about this, and you can actually go on Brene's site. She's got a list of values that she publishes. My encouragement to everyone is to look at that list and get really clear on what your top 2 or 3 values are in your life. And ask yourself the tough question, is everything in my life aligned with these values? Because oftentimes a lot of the tension and a lot of the friction in our lives is because we're completely out of alignment with what we even believe in. And I discovered that for myself the hard way. Mine are freedom, courage, and authenticity. And I was like, ooh, well, I sort of went way off course. Like, I was shipwrecked, right? And finally found a way to come back to it. So that's a really beautiful way to figure out what are those values, explore them a little bit. What are the behaviors in your life that support those values? Number 8 is we ask for help. We talked about this earlier. We don't go it alone. And I think this is a big one where the impact over ego bit comes in, and it's really, really important. Like, create your power pack, create your tribe. Like, that's a big piece of not going it alone and having that sacred container to ask for help. Like, you know who those people are. So very quickly, number 9 is we rewrite the script of what it means to be successful, F-U-L-L, because what I realized is I was experiencing a lot of success empty versus successful. And I think it's really important that that come from a place of understanding our purpose and understanding what fulfillment, or what I like to call soulfillment, means to us individually. And so I explore, there's like half a chapter on purpose alone, and we don't have time to go into that here, but I kind of debunk some myths around purpose, and then give you some ideas around how to start to explore purpose and some questions to ask yourself. So a couple of those questions I'll put into the notes that I send out to everybody. One of my favorites I'll give to you right now. What's calling you to play so big that you scare the shit out of yourself? And what are you risking if you ignore it? And number 10 is that we're soul ambassadors in every aspect of our lives. Like, we take this seriously. This is our work in the world. So think about it in your work, in your family, in your social lives, in everything. This is how we live and lead. Because Brene says it best, who we are is how we lead, right? And so this is really, really, really important. And I know, like, when I ended my book, I ended in this place of, I said, you know what? I'm so glad. People thought I was nuts when I left my career. They thought I was absolutely batshit crazy. And at the end of the day, I'm so happy that I'm in a place of saying, thank God I did that. And I'm not in a place of being 50 years old and saying, I wish I would have. And those are the questions that I ask myself all the time. Like, do I want to be saying, thank God I did that, even if I fell along the way, because I will. If I'm being brave, I'll fall. That's the risk we take. But I think those are important things for us to remember. So one last thing I would love to do, and so for you at home, listen to how I describe this, and maybe there's something that's a talisman or something of importance to you at home that you can do this same exercise with. For each of you in the room, and you guys can all get up at the same time, there's a host of stones at the end of there. I would ask each of you to choose one stone, whichever stone speaks to you. This is going to be your stone to keep. You're going to take it, you're going to keep it with you, we're going to embed some intention into it. So whatever speaks to you, as something, think about it as something that you might want to carry in your pocket with you, in your purse with you, have on your desk every day as a reminder, whichever one speaks to you.
And for everyone that's online, it can be an intention bracelet or necklace.
Oh, a crystal. It could be anything that you have that's meaningful to you that will remind you of this experience. And we'll go through that in just a second. We'll let everybody
Shelly's
get
about to do her closing exercise. So if you got a moment, go grab something that means a lot to you. Prayer beads for me.
Oh, prayer beads. That's a good one. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, does everybody have their stone? And everybody at home, you have whatever's most meaningful to you, a crystal, prayer beads, a talisman of some kind, something that's very meaningful to you. What I would ask, so these are going to become our intention stones. So as everybody hold yours in your hand, we're going to do a couple of things with these. I would first love for everybody to hold it in your hand and infuse it with intention. What is a key takeaway from this conversation today that you want to take with you and you want this stone to represent? It could be something you want to change, you want to act on immediately, a mantra you want yourself to remember. Just think about that and infuse that energy. The next thing I want to do is I want us to, for those of us in the room, we're going to go around the table, and what I would ask is that for those of you online, I would love for you to write these words in the chat so that we can see them and that we can acknowledge them as well. And what we're going to do is each one of us, we're going to go around the room and we're going to say, I am, and say your name. So I am Shelly. I am Chief Soul Officer of my own life. And then as soon as I say that, as soon as each one of you says that, the group of us will respond, and so it is.
Maybe we could say as a group to everybody online, assuming that you've typed it in and you've declared that you are the Chief Soul Officer of your life, we can say,
and so it is.